So a lot of people have asked to see my cut paper collage technique, and I haven't done a full video on this before, so this is the first time kind of documenting the process from start to finish. So I'm going to show you how I collect the magazines. I get a lot of these from eBay, and I use only National Geographics and magazines of similar quality to that because the ink in the paper is of a higher quality and isn't too thin to see images through on the reverse side of the page or text on the reverse side of the page. So I'm also going to show you just how I separate the colors into little bags, almost like tubes of paint. So just creating a color palette, and then how I build a collage. So it's kind of almost like building a puzzle, just fitting together all the pieces, keeping the vision of the finished picture in mind while matching up each little edge of each piece to transition seamlessly across an entire composition.
So the first step in my collage process is to acquire a lot of used magazines. Sometimes they don't have all the pages in them. Sometimes they're wrinkled or otherwise not in great shape. Other times they're almost brand new. So I get magazines from friends, also from eBay and other sources. I get just big lots of National Geographic magazines specifically because the paper and the ink is a really good quality, and some magazines have a thinner paper so you can see words and stuff more through the pictures or through a lighter color from the back of the page. So I like to use National Geographic magazines for that purpose. So what I do is I go through the magazine and I will see colors like this green right here, which is a great green, and it's almost like looking for colors like tubes of paint. So I'm looking for greens. Then what I do is I have a big envelope full of greens and I put this in there. And once I have accumulated a lot of one color, so that's my greens, these are my blues, I have reds, I have browns, I have purples. So basically like the whole color wheel palette. I get that all organized first in big bags, and then I will take those colors and I will cut off the green part, and then cut out the other colors. Like in this case, there's kind of a burnt umber and black, ivory black in the dark areas. So I'll cut that out, and then I separate those into smaller piles and make small bags of little sandwich bags of that color. So I'll show you that process next. But notice that sometimes a piece will have 3 colors in it. So this has the greens, the brown, and the black. And on the other side, it has the gray and white and then brown. And I can actually, like, sometimes I'll decide which side I want to go with for the color, and then divide that side into, the 3 colors and put those in 3 separate bags, if that makes sense. So for something like this, it has like a dark green on that page, and then this kind of, green and brown combination on that side. So I might use this side, or this side, either one I could use as a transition color between a, more green, like a more solid green, transitioning into like a more solid brown. So sometimes I will set aside those transition pages just because it's not any more green than it is brown. And so like you need those transitions in between green shapes and brown shapes to make it blend really smoothly and give a sense of three-dimensional quality. So I'm gonna go grab my smaller bags, and then we're gonna sort these into smaller, like Ziploc sandwich bag size. And that's how I build my color palette, or basically it's kind of like, you know, again, like making tubes of paint. So you have your paint set with certain colors that you prefer. Like I like phthalo blue, I like alizarin crimson, I like ivory black, Mars black, burnt umber, burnt sienna, yellow ochre, titanium white. So what you want to do is build a color palette, and then with a specific composition, sometimes I'll need a color that's not in my basic palette, and then I'll have to go back through all the magazines and look for that specific color. Like the last piece I just created had a lot of like yellow and orange and golden tones, and I didn't really have some of those specific tones, so I would look through magazines and find little areas like this to cut out and piece in to build that golden landscape. So you start with your palette, all of the big bags and then the little bags of color, and then you kind of work from there with building each composition almost like a puzzle. And if there's one little piece, a little transition space that you need, you know, an extra little pop of color or a blend of colors, then you can just go back through tons of magazines sometimes. Sometimes it'll take like 20, 30, 40 magazines till you find that right little piece. So it's kind of like a treasure hunt in a way, and I also feel like it's almost like a metaphor for redemption, because these things are basically trash. They could just go through a recycle bin, but instead they are turned into you know, beautiful pieces of art and have kind of like a second life and live their best life in their second life as fine art instead of just, you know, part of a magazine that has many different copies. So I'm creating brand new, unique compositions and imagery with kind of lost or rejected or thrown away, discarded material. So that's what I love so much about working with cut paper.
So after I sort the pages of color into the larger bags, then I cut off any peripheral text or images that are not correlating with that color, and then cut that color into size pieces that are sized to fit inside of a small little sandwich Ziploc bag. So I have my red sorted into a little bag of red, and these are kind of like my tubes of paint, just my color palette. So, and then the green ones are sorted into the green bag, and the blue into the blue, and yellow into yellow, and so on and so forth. So this is how I create a collection of colors that then I can draw from when I'm making a finished composition. So to do a finished cut paper collage, I start with a primed canvas, a primed stretch canvas, and you can purchase one or you can stretch your own and prime your own. That part is up to you. But what I do is for a landscape, I'll just establish where the horizon line is going to be, and the rest of the process is very intuitive and almost blind in the sense of I don't sketch out all of the details of the composition. I kind of go by feel across the space of the land and the sky. So you can see that I have a lot of little pieces laying around on the sides of the canvas, and then you can kind of see the image start to build from left to right. And I always work left to right because I'm right-handed and I don't want to drag my hand across a finished part of the composition. So I just start at the left side, and then as my hand moves to the right, then the image is finished from left to right and top to bottom. So this process takes many hours, many days to fully complete. And you can see that I'm working on completing the sky and also the landscape. And I've still got that white area of canvas where I am laying my hand as I work either above or below that horizon line from left to right. And you can see that all of these pieces just kind of flow together. These are from many, many different scenes, whether sky or sea or a door or whatever it might be part of that sky. On the land, there is brick, there is rock, there are fabrics, there are all kind of things that put together that desert landscape scene. So there's just a lot, even fur, even animal fur. I mean, just the color is really what I go on and transition from one color to the next color, one piece to the next piece, and then how that creates a sense of depth and three-dimensional quality in the overall landscape. So as I'm working left to right, I also really want to create a focal point, and I'm going to put as the focal point these three tall columns on the right-hand side of the composition, and those really stand as kind of a metaphor, symbol for resilience in the face of trying circumstances. Obviously, these columns are ancient and have worn the test of time and a lot of weather and stress, and that's kind of like the human experience, right? Like going through a lot of stressful, difficult circumstances and still standing, even if you're a little bit bent, but you're not all the way broken down. And so I really liked those pillars for the symbolism that they held and included those as the primary focal point. And I also really was thinking, with choosing 3 pillars as opposed to another number, just that my sons are kind of the legacy that I'm going to leave on this earth. And so I have them as kind of like 3 pillars of my legacy to carry on. So that's kind of just a little personal, some of these personal things sort of go through my mind as I'm creating a composition. So the final step of the collage process is to varnish the top. Now this part is extremely important. This is what sets this apart from any other collage that you might find that's not varnished. This is going to create a museum quality finish on this entire surface and basically push this paper into the canvas in a way that makes it look like it's painted. It's just very two-dimensional, and if you have adhered your papers correctly, and I brush the back of each piece of paper with a gloss medium, acrylic medium, and then lay the papers down and really press them down well into the canvas. So then when I brush this varnish over the top, those papers shouldn't be wrinkling up or peeling back or looking like they're not adhered down. It really is a test of the adhesion to brush a wet varnish over the top of all of these pieces of paper. So it's a little bit of a scary process after you've invested hours and hours and days of work to create the composition, to then basically dump liquid on top of it and hope that the paper was all adhered well. So, but I am confident enough in my skills to know that I go piece by piece, and I pay attention to the adhesion as I go. So I have not yet had a canvas turn out to where I had to scrap the whole thing because the varnish revealed a flaw. And, if that was to happen, I would have to either scrap the whole thing or at least replace that piece and revarnish that area and kind of do a little bit of patchwork on it. But anyway, you can see that this is turning out well. You have to work very quickly with the varnish. You have to know how to apply a varnish. You can't linger or overbrush an area or the varnish will get cloudy, and that is going to ruin your collage as well, because you want a clear glass-like varnish on top of the surface. The other thing that the varnish does, other than create, a very flat painterly surface, it also has UVLs in it, and those UVLs are critical for finishing a collage because that is what protects these colors in the magazine paper from fading. It protects them from light rays. I have had my collages by a window in direct sunlight, lots of light for years, and they do not fade. So if it did not have a good UVL varnish, that paper would fade, probably in under a year. So this will last just as long as a canvas painting, in other words. So the UVL varnish is extremely important for that. The other thing that the varnish is important for is protecting the paper so that it doesn't get scratched. Now, you still want to be very delicate and careful with handling a cut paper piece because, if you scratch it with something sharp, obviously it is going to lift, it's going to scratch off the varnish and some of the pigment probably off of the paper. So you want to make sure to handle it carefully. Don't run a razor blade across the top of it, but that's kind of obvious. I mean, who would do that to any fine art, right? So the varnish protects the paper. It protects the ink in the paper from fading. And it's also kind of like a finish that's similar to how a canvas is finished, a painting is finished when it's left unframed. So you don't have to put this under glass. However, if you are putting this in a high traffic area, or say it's like going in, a kitchen space where there might be splattering or anything like that, then yes, you would want to put it under glass. But if it's going in a living room or an office and there's not a lot of grease in the air or other things that might stick to the surface, then you can go ahead and just leave it, just actually how it is. Because you can see I've painted all the edges of the canvas and I'm varnishing those edges as well. And so it's finished just like a wrapped canvas painting. So it's kind of up to the purchaser if you want to put it under glass. You can, but it's not necessarily a must. It's not required. So after I'm done with the varnish, then I'm going to just let this dry and then I will hang it up. You can see that this has just a really nice even coating. I like to tip it. What I'm doing when I tip it is I'm looking at the light catching the surface all the way across to make sure that that surface is just glass-like, that there is no lifting of the paper, that there's no spot that's missed, because you definitely don't want a spot that's going to be missed. And last and finally, the varnish also darkens the colors just a little notch. So the darks kind of go into a little deeper dark, and even the highlights will kind of get a little bit more rich in undertone with the varnish. So that's another really nice quality about a varnish, is it just makes those colors really pop. These are some other collages that I just wanted to share since I'm showing you just one collage that I've done. So these are all images that are made of cut paper. This one is called Hide and Seek. And you can see that there's a main figure, but there actually are 6 people in this composition. The other 5 people are hidden, hence the title. And there's a little bird in the bottom right corner that's kind of signaling, like a bird would signal that somebody's in the forest or whatever, kind of giving away the positions. This one is untitled, but it's kind of reminiscent of the Last Supper, and it's sort of a postmodern Last Supper. Like the Last Supper before you go vegan or something, because it's all milk and dairy and meat on the table. So this particular piece is part of a triptych. So it's the first panel in a 3-panel piece that is a very historic oriented piece. So it's all black and white. And sometimes I do cut paper pieces that are just black and white, and you can see that the girl on the left is the only part of the image that's in full color. This particular landscape is called the Tree of Knowledge, and you can see once again all of those transitions in the sky with the clouds, those different kind of tones of blue, and then the landscape having kind of a push and pull of foreground, background in that one. This is an underwater scene, which I haven't done a lot of those, but I really loved working with some of the blues in the underwater scene. This one, Head Above Water. So this is called Shadowland, and it's another landscape made with cut paper. This one is Deliverance, and I just love some of the depth in that one. This is a very small, like 4x6 miniature little collage. And then just kind of to recap the process. So you start with your palette. This is my palette for the piece that I did called Outside the Fence. And I have a lot of reds, oranges, caramely colors, tans, things like that in this piece, and browns. And then I start with the horizon line for a landscape, and then start just building around that and transitioning from color to color. And this is Outside the Fence, the finished piece. So I hope you enjoyed my description of my collage process, and if you have any questions, feel free to put it in the comments. I did start doing cut paper collage when I was a kid, just out of necessity, because we didn't have any art supplies. Or even an art supply store in the very small town where I grew up. And then I went on to do cut paper collage, in college and beyond on a more serious level, and really learned all of these conservation techniques for making sure that the paper doesn't fade and the ink doesn't fade, and the paper lays flat. And, really this could be considered more like painting with paper than really a collage, in the sense of it's not a jumble of a whole bunch of images, as much as it's transitions of color and texture and light and dark from one piece to the next, almost like building a puzzle across an entire composition. So again, I hope you enjoyed watching the process. I hope it helps some of you maybe understand what a cut paper on canvas piece is. And yeah, let me know if you have any questions, or if you want to try this out yourself and you run into any little issues. I'd be happy to help.